The blood on her dress had frozen into dark crystals that caught the first light of Christmas morning, and Zachary Quinn knew immediately that whoever this young woman was, she had ridden through hell to end up sleeping in his barn. He had come out to check on his horses before dawn, a habit born from 10 years of ranching alone in the Nebraska Territory, 3 miles outside Nebraska City. The year was 1872, and the winter had been particularly brutal. Snow had fallen steadily for 3 days straight, only letting up late Christmas Eve. Now, in the pale light filtering through the barn slats, he saw her curled in the corner of an empty stall, buried under loose hay with only her face visible, pale as the snow outside. Zachary approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. She looked young, maybe early 20s, with dark brown hair matted against her forehead. Her breathing was shallow but steady. As he knelt beside her, he noticed the torn fabric of her dress, the bruises on her exposed wrist, and what looked like rope burns around her delicate skin. His jaw tightened. He had seen enough during his years as a ranch hand and then a property owner to recognize someone running from trouble. "Miss," he said softly, reaching out to touch her shoulder. "Miss, you need to wake up." Her eyes flew open, green as spring grass, wide with terror. She scrambled backward, her back hitting the wooden stall wall, hands raised defensively. "Easy now," Zachary said, holding up both his hands to show he meant no harm. "You are on my property, but you are safe here. My name is Zachary Quinn. This is my ranch." She stared at him, chest heaving, clearly trying to assess whether he was a threat. Her gaze darted to the barn door, calculating distance. "I am not going to hurt you," he continued, his voice low and calm, "but you are half frozen and you have been bleeding. You need help." Her voice came out as a rasp, her lips cracked from the cold. "I did not mean to trespass. I just needed somewhere to hide, to rest." "Who are you running from?" She pressed her lips together, and he saw fear flash across her face again. She was not ready to trust him with that information, and he could not blame her. "All right," Zachary said, shifting his weight. "You do not have to tell me yet, but you need to get warm and you need food. Can you stand?" She nodded slowly, using the wall to push herself up. Her legs trembled, and she would have fallen if Zachary had not moved quickly to steady her. She flinched at his touch but did not pull away, probably because she knew she needed the support. "My house is just across the yard," he said. "It is not much, but it is warm and the door locks from the inside. You will be safe there." "I cannot impose," she whispered, though her body sagged against him. "It is Christmas morning, miss. What kind of man would I be if I left you out here to freeze?" He paused. "Besides, I was not planning on doing much today anyway. Come on." He helped her across the snow-covered yard, her thin boots soaking through immediately. She was shivering violently by the time they reached the small wooden house he had built with his own hands 5 years ago. It was simple but solid, with a good fireplace and thick walls that kept out the worst of the Nebraska winter. Once inside, Zachary guided her to the chair closest to the fire, which was still burning from when he had stoked it before heading to the barn. The main room served as both kitchen and living space, with a bedroom off to one side and a small storage room on the other. "Let me get you some blankets," he said, moving toward his bedroom. He returned with his warmest quilt and draped it around her shoulders. She clutched it gratefully, her teeth chattering. "Thank you," she managed between shivers. "When did you last eat?" 2 days ago, I think, maybe 3. I lost track." Zachary moved to his small kitchen area and began pulling out what he had on hand. It was not much for a Christmas breakfast, but he had eggs, some bacon, bread, and coffee. He set about making a meal while she sat by the fire, slowly thawing out. "What is your name?" he asked as he worked. There was a long pause. He glanced over his shoulder and saw her wrestling with the decision. "Francesca," she finally said. "Francesca Cooper." "Francesca," he repeated, testing the name. "That is a pretty name. Where are you from, Francesca?" "Iowa originally, but I have been traveling in winter through Nebraska territory. That is dangerous for anyone, let alone a woman alone." "I know," she said quietly. "I did not have a choice." He wanted to press for more information, but he could see the exhaustion in every line of her body. Questions could wait. Right now, she needed food and rest. When the food was ready, he brought it to her on a plate. Her eyes widened at the sight of it, and she took the plate with trembling hands. "Eat slowly," he cautioned. "Your stomach will not handle too much at once if you have not eaten in days." She nodded and did as he suggested, taking small bites and chewing carefully. He poured her coffee and handed her the cup, then made himself a smaller portion and sat in the other chair near the fire. They ate in silence for a while. Zachary found himself studying her when she was not looking. Even dirty and bruised, she was beautiful in a delicate way that made something in his chest tighten. Her hands were small and graceful, though calloused, suggesting she was no stranger to work. There was an intelligence in her eyes, a wariness born from experience rather than simple fear. "This is very good," she said after finishing about half the plate. "I cannot eat any more right now, but it is delicious. Thank you. You are welcome." He took her plate and set it aside. "Now you need rest, real rest in a proper bed." "I could not possibly. You can and you will," he said firmly but kindly. "I have a bed in the other room. You will take it. I will sleep out here by the fire." "That is your bed," she protested. "I cannot take your bed. You can, and you are going to." He stood and moved toward the bedroom. "Come on. You can barely keep your eyes open." She followed reluctantly, the quilt still wrapped around her shoulders. His bedroom was small and simple, with a sturdy bed frame he had built himself, a decent mattress and several blankets. It was clean and neat, the habits of a man who lived alone and kept his space orderly. "I will need to tend to those wounds before you sleep," he said, noticing fresh blood seeping through her dress at her shoulder. "Do you have anything else to wear?" She shook her head. "I left with just what I was wearing." He went to a trunk at the foot of the bed and pulled out a clean shirt. "This will be too big for you, but it is clean and warm. Can you manage on your own, or do you need help?" Color rose in her pale cheeks. "I can manage, thank you." "All right. Change into this, and I will get some water and cloth to clean those wounds." He stepped out and closed the door behind him, giving her privacy. While he heated water over the fire and gathered clean cloths, he found himself thinking about what could have happened to her. The bruises, the rope burns, the blood, the terror in her eyes when she first woke, it all pointed to violence. Someone had hurt her and she had run. A protective anger rose in him, surprising in its intensity. He barely knew this woman, but the thought of someone harming her made his hands clench into fists. "I am decent," her voice came from the bedroom. He carried the basin of warm water and the cloths into the room. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, swimming in his shirt, which hung to her knees. She had removed her torn dress, which lay in a heap on the floor. He could see now that she had a gash on her shoulder, probably from barbed wire or something similar. "This might hurt," he warned as he sat beside her and began carefully cleaning the wound. She winced but did not cry out. "I have had worse." "I am sorry to hear that." He worked carefully, his touch as gentle as he could make it. "This is going to need stitching." "I know." "Do you have a needle and thread?" "I do, but maybe you should rest first. Better to do it now while I am still too tired to feel it much." There was a grim practicality in her voice that spoke of someone who had dealt with injuries before. He retrieved his sewing kit, the one he used for mending tack and clothes. He threaded the needle with the finest thread he had and cleaned it thoroughly. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, gripping the edge of the bed with her free hand. Zachary had stitched up wounds before on himself and on injured animals, but his hands had never felt less steady. He forced himself to focus, working as quickly and efficiently as he could. To her credit, Francesca barely moved, though he could see the strain in her face, the way she held her breath. "All done," he said finally, tying off the last stitch. "You are braver than most men I know." "I have had practice being brave," she said softly. He wanted to ask what she meant, but she was swaying where she sat, exhaustion finally overwhelming her. "Lie down," he said, helping her settle back onto the pillow. He pulled the blankets up over her. "Sleep as long as you need. The door locks from the inside if that makes you feel safer." "Where will you be?" "Right out there. I promise I will not come in unless you call for me." She looked at him for a long moment, those green eyes searching his face for something. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded slightly. "Thank you, Zachary Quinn." "You are welcome, Francesca Cooper." He left the room and closed the door, hearing the soft click of the lock engaging. He did not blame her for her caution. He settled into the chair by the fire and tried to read from the Bible he kept on the side table, but his mind kept wandering to the woman sleeping in his bed. It was Christmas morning, 1872, and Zachary had woken up expecting another solitary day like all the ones before it. Instead, he found himself sheltering a mysterious woman who had quite literally stumbled into his life. He did not believe much in signs or fate, but there was something about this that felt significant, like the beginning of something he could not yet name. Outside, fresh snow began to fall, covering the tracks Francesca must have left when she arrived. It was as if the world itself was helping to hide her, to give her a chance to rest and heal. Zachary added another log to the fire and settled in to wait, ready to protect this stranger who had somehow, in the span of an hour, become someone he already knew he would not let anyone hurt again. Hours passed. The winter sun climbed higher in the sky, though it remained pale and distant through the cloud cover. Zachary kept himself busy with small tasks around the house, careful to stay quiet so as not to disturb Francesca's rest. He cleaned the kitchen, mended a tear in his coat, and sorted through some paperwork related to the ranch. Around midday, he heard the bedroom door unlock and open. Francesca emerged, still wearing his oversized shirt, her hair tangled around her shoulders. She looked better after the sleep, though the bruises on her face were darker now, more pronounced. "How do you feel?" he asked, setting aside the harness he had been oiling. "Better," she admitted. "Sore but better. How long did I sleep?" "About 6 hours. It is just past noon." She moved to the window and looked out at the snowy landscape. "It is still snowing." "Yes. This will likely continue through tomorrow. No one will be traveling in this weather." He saw relief cross her face. No one traveling meant whoever she was running from could not easily track her. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "Starving, actually." He smiled. "That is a good sign. Sit down and I will make something." As he prepared food, she sat by the fire, watching him with those intelligent green eyes. The silence between them was comfortable, which surprised him. He was used to being alone, and most times when he had to deal with people, he found the interaction exhausting. But Francesca's presence felt natural, like she belonged in this space. "You live here alone?" she asked as he handed her a bowl of stew he had reheated. "Yes. Have for about 5 years now. No wife, no family, no wife. My parents passed when I was young. I have a brother somewhere back east, but we have not spoken in years." He paused. "What about you? Do you have family?" Her expression darkened. "I did. My parents died of fever 3 years ago." "My brother died in the war." "I am sorry." "Thank you." She took a bite of the stew. "This is good. Just beef and vegetables, nothing fancy." After 3 days of nothing, it might as well be a feast. She ate several more bites before speaking again. I suppose you want to know why I was sleeping in your barn. Only if you want to tell me. You do not owe me explanations. You gave me your bed on Christmas morning. I think I owe you at least the truth. She set down the bowl and wrapped her arms around herself. I was married 6 months ago. Zachary felt something sink in his chest at those words. Of course she was married. A woman like her would not be alone. His name was Robert Winters, she continued, her voice carefully controlled. He seemed kind when he courted me, gentle. I had been alone since my parents died, working as a seamstress in Iowa City, barely making enough to survive. When he asked me to marry him, I thought it was my chance at a better life. She paused and Zachary waited, letting her tell the story at her own pace. It took less than a week after the wedding for him to show his true nature. He drank. When he drank, he became violent. I learned to stay out of his way, to make myself small and quiet, but it was never enough. There was always something I did wrong, some reason for him to. She touched her shoulder where he had stitched her wound. He did this 3 days ago. I finally realized that if I stayed, he would kill me. So you ran, Zachary said quietly. So I ran. I took one of his horses in the middle of the night and rode. I knew he would follow, so I kept moving. I traded the horse for a different one in a small town, hoping to throw him off my trail. But yesterday, the second horse went lame. I had to leave it behind and continue on foot. I saw your barn last night and I could not go any further. I thought I would rest for a few hours and then move on before dawn, but I must have been more exhausted than I realized. Does he know you came this direction? I do not think so. I went south first, then doubled back north. I have been trying to be unpredictable. Zachary leaned forward in his chair. Francesca, you are safe here. I will not let anyone hurt you. You do not know him. He is not a man who gives up easily. Neither am I. He held her gaze. You can stay here as long as you need to, until you figure out what you want to do next. I cannot ask you to do that. If he finds me here, he will cause trouble for you. Let him try. There was steel in Zachary's voice. This is my land and you are under my protection. That means something out here. She studied him for a long moment. Why are you helping me? You do not even know me. I know enough. I know you have been hurt and you are running for your life. I know you are brave and strong because you made it through 3 days in winter weather that would have killed most people. And I know that it is Christmas, and maybe that means something. Maybe it means I was supposed to be in that barn this morning at exactly the right time to find you. Tears welled up in her eyes, the first real emotion breaking through her carefully maintained composure. I have not met many truly good men in my life. Then you have been in the wrong places. He stood and added wood to the fire. Rest some more if you need to. I have some work to do in the barn, but I will be close by. Zachary, she said as he reached for his coat, thank you. For the bed, for the food, for believing me, for all of it. You do not need to thank me for basic human decency. He headed out into the snow, but he could feel her watching him through the window. The cold air helped clear his head, which was good because his thoughts were tangled. 6 hours ago, he had been alone. Now, there was a married woman sleeping in his house, a woman he was already starting to care about more than was wise. But she was running from an abusive husband, and that complicated everything. Even out here in the Nebraska territory, where law was more suggestion than rule, marriage was still marriage. If this Robert Winters showed up claiming his legal wife, Zachary's options for protecting her would be limited. Unless she was a widow. The thought came unbidden and unwelcome. He was not a violent man, did not relish the thought of killing, but if Robert Winters showed up on his property threatening Francesca, Zachary knew he would do whatever was necessary to protect her. He spent the next few hours tending to the horses and checking the other outbuildings, making sure everything was secure. The snow continued falling, and by the time he returned to the house as darkness fell, there were several fresh inches on the ground. Francesca had moved from the chair by the fire to the kitchen area. She was washing the dishes from lunch, moving carefully because of her injured shoulder. "You do not need to do that," he said, stomping snow off his boots before entering. "I need to do something. I am not used to sitting idle." She glanced at him. "I found some potatoes and onions. I could make something for dinner if you would like. You are supposed to be resting." "I have rested. Now I need to feel useful." There was a plea in her voice that he understood. She needed to contribute to not feel like a burden. "All right," he agreed, "but nothing too complicated. You are still healing." They worked together to prepare a simple meal, moving around each other in the small kitchen with surprising ease. Zachary found himself watching her when she was not looking, noticing small things. The way she hummed softly while she worked, how she tested the potatoes with a fork to check if they were done, the small smile that played at her lips when she managed to flip the onions without spilling any. "You are a good cook," he said as they sat down to eat. "My mother taught me. She said a woman should always be able to feed herself and anyone who might need feeding." She paused. "I miss her, especially at Christmas." "What were your Christmas traditions?" Her face softened with memory. "We would go to church Christmas Eve, all dressed in our best clothes. Then we would come home and my mother would make a special dinner. Nothing fancy, but special. After dinner, we would sing carols and my father would read the Christmas story from the Bible. Christmas morning, there would be small gifts, usually practical things we needed, but wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. It felt magical when I was young." "It sounds nice," Zachary said honestly. "We did not celebrate much when I was growing up. My father thought it was frivolous." "That is sad. Everyone should have some magic in their childhood. What about last Christmas? With your husband?" He regretted the question immediately when he saw her expression close off. "We did not celebrate. He said it was a waste of time and money." She pushed food around her plate. "I think that was when I first started to understand the mistake I had made. He would not even let me go to church. I am sorry." "Do not be. It taught me something important. It taught me that I would rather be alone and free than trapped in comfort." She looked up at him. "Although I suppose I am not entirely alone anymore, am I?" "No," he said softly. "You are not alone." After dinner, they sat by the fire again. Francesca had found a book on his shelf, a collection of poems, and she read while he worked on mending a bridle. The domestic scene felt surreal to Zachary. Less than 24 hours ago, his life had been entirely his own, solitary and predictable. Now there was this woman, this beautiful, wounded, brave woman, sitting in his house as if she had always been there. "Zachary," she said, breaking the comfortable silence, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you ever been in love?" The question surprised him. He set down the bridle and considered. "Once. A long time ago when I was about 20. Her name was Margaret. She was the daughter of the man I worked for as a ranch hand down in Kansas. We courted for about 6 months. What happened? Her father found out and fired me on the spot, told me I was not good enough for his daughter. She married a banker that same year." He smiled without humor. "I heard they have 4 children now and a big house in town. Do you still love her?" "No. I think I was more in love with the idea of not being alone than with her specifically. When I really think about it, we did not have much in common. She liked society and parties. I like silence and open spaces." He paused. "What about you? Before Robert Winters, were you in love?" "Once. When I was 18. He was a soldier about to ship out to fight in the war. We had known each other growing up, and the night before he left, he kissed me under the stars and promised to come back and marry me." Her voice grew sad. "He died at Gettysburg. I got a letter from his commanding officer 6 months later. I am sorry." "Me too. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if he had lived, if we had married. Would I have been happy?" She shook her head. "But there is no point in wondering. He died, and I eventually married Robert, and here I am." "Here you are," Zachary echoed, "safe and healing." She met his eyes across the firelight. "Yes, safe and healing." That night, Francesca took the bedroom again despite her protests, and Zachary made himself as comfortable as possible in the chair by the fire. Sleep came in fits and starts, his mind too active to fully rest. Every sound outside made him alert, listening for the approach of horses, though he knew it was unlikely anyone would travel in this weather. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. The snow continued, sometimes heavy and sometimes light, but always present. Zachary did his necessary chores outside while Francesca gradually took over more of the household tasks inside. He protested at first, but she insisted, and he came to appreciate coming in from the cold to find coffee already made and something cooking on the stove. They talked a lot during those snowbound days. Zachary told her about building the ranch, about the challenges of making a living from the land, about his hopes to expand the herd in the spring. Francesca told him about her life in Iowa City, about the women she had sewn for, about her dreams of someday having enough money to open her own dress shop. "Why Nebraska City?" he asked one evening about 4 days after he had found her. "I was not specifically heading there. I just knew I needed to get away from Iowa, away from anywhere Robert might look for me. I thought maybe I could find work in a bigger town, disappear into a crowd." She pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders. They were both sitting by the fire, which had become their evening routine. "I did not plan very well, I just ran. Sometimes running is the only plan you need." "Have you ever had to run from anything?" he considered. "Not the way you mean, but I ran from my father's expectations. He wanted me to go east to work in business like my brother. I wanted wide open spaces and hard, honest work, so I left when I was 16 and never went back." "Do you regret it?" "Not even for a moment." He looked at her. "Do you regret running from Robert?" "Not even for a second." She smiled, and it transformed her face, making her look younger and lighter. "Even if I end up in some tiny town working as a laundress for the rest of my life, it will be better than one more day with him." "You will not end up as a laundress," Zachary said firmly. "You are too talented for that. You will have your dress shop someday. You sound very certain." "I am. You are a survivor, Francesca. Survivors find a way." She looked at him with such warmth that his breath caught. In the firelight, with her hair loose around her shoulders and her eyes bright, she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And more than that, she was smart and funny and kind. She made him laugh with her observations about the world. She listened when he talked about the ranch with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions. She fit into his life like a missing piece he had not known was absent. He was falling in love with her, he realized. Maybe had already fallen. The thought should have terrified him, but instead it felt right. Natural. Like finding her in his barn on Christmas morning had been exactly what was meant to happen. But she was married. That fact hung between them, unspoken but always present. No matter how much he cared for her, no matter how much she might come to care for him, the legal and moral reality remained unchanged, unless Robert Winters was dead. Or unless she could prove abuse and get a divorce, though that was rare and difficult even in more progressive parts of the country. Out here in the Nebraska territory, it would be nearly impossible. "You look troubled," Francesca said softly. "What are you thinking about?" He could not tell her the truth. Just wondering how long this snow will last. I need to get to town eventually for supplies." "I hope it lasts forever," she said quietly. "I know that is selfish, but I feel safe here. With you, you are safe here," he assured her. "Snow or no snow." On the sixth day, the snow finally stopped. The sun came out, brilliant and blinding against the white landscape. Zachary knew he needed to make the trip to Nebraska City soon. His supplies were running low, and there were things he needed to take care of in town. "I should go with you," Francesca said when he mentioned it over breakfast. "It is too risky. If Robert is looking for you, if he is in Nebraska City, I need to know. I cannot hide here forever, Zachary. Eventually, I need to face reality." She was right, much as he did not want to admit it. "All right, but we go carefully, and if there is any sign of him, we leave immediately." They took his wagon, pulled by his two strongest horses. The road to town had been used by other travelers in the days since the snow stopped, so it was passable though slow going. Francesca sat beside him on the bench, bundled in blankets, her eyes scanning the horizon nervously. Nebraska City was larger than she had expected, a busy town on the Missouri River that served as a jumping-off point for settlers heading west. The streets were muddy with melted snow, busy with people and wagons and horses. Zachary guided them to the general store and helped Francesca down from the wagon. "Stay close to me," he said quietly. Inside the store, he went about gathering supplies while Francesca looked at bolts of fabric, her fingers trailing over the material with obvious longing. The storekeeper, a friendly man named Thomas Hayes who Zachary had known for years, greeted them warmly. "Quinn, good to see you made it through the snow all right, and who is this with you?" Zachary had prepared for this question. "This is my cousin, Francesca. She is visiting from Iowa." "Pleased to meet you, miss," Thomas said, tipping his hat. "Your cousin here is one of the good ones, honest as the day is long." "I am discovering that," Francesca said with a small smile. As Zachary paid for the supplies, Thomas leaned in conspiratorially. "Say, Quinn, you should stop by the saloon before you head back. There was a man in there yesterday asking questions about a woman matching your cousin's description. Said she was his wife and had run off. Seemed pretty worked up about it." Zachary's blood ran cold. Beside him, he felt Francesca stiffen. "What did he look like?" Zachary asked, keeping his voice casual. "Tall fellow, dark hair, fancy clothes. City type. Name of Robert Winters. Did you tell him anything?" "Did not have anything to tell him. I had not seen anyone matching the description." Thomas glanced at Francesca, then back at Zachary. His eyes held understanding. "And even if I had, I figure a woman who runs from her husband has her reasons, especially one who looks as scared as this fellow's wife supposedly does. Thank you, Thomas. You take care now, Quinn. You and your cousin both." They loaded the supplies quickly and started back toward the ranch. Francesca was quiet, her face pale. "He is here," she whispered. "He found me." "He has not found you yet. He is asking questions, which means he does not know where you are. He will find out. Someone will have seen me. Someone will tell him. No one saw you except Thomas, and he is not going to say anything." Zachary reached over and took her hand. "You are safe, Francesca, I promise." But he knew the promise might be one he could not keep. If Robert Winters was in Nebraska City asking questions, it was only a matter of time before someone pointed him toward Zachary's ranch. And when that happened, things would get complicated. They made it back to the ranch as the sun was setting. Zachary was on high alert now, watching for any sign of followers. Once they were inside, he locked the door and checked his rifle, making sure it was loaded and ready. "You think he will come here?" Francesca said. It was not a question. "I think it is possible. We need to be prepared." "What will you do if he does?" Zachary set the rifle aside and turned to face her. "I will protect you. Whatever that takes. He has the law on his side. I am his legal wife. The law is a long way from here and property rights count for a lot. This is my land. He cannot just come here and take you. Yes, he can. If he brings a sheriff, then we will deal with that when it happens. He crossed to where she stood and took her hands in his. Francesca, listen to me. I know we have only known each other for less than a week. I know this is all complicated and messy, but I care about you, more than I have cared about anyone in a very long time. I am not going to let you go back to a man who hurts you. I do not care what the law says. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I care about you too, so much that it scares me. I never thought I would feel this way about anyone, especially not after everything with Robert. But you are kind and good and you make me feel safe. And that makes this harder because I cannot ask you to risk everything for me. You are not asking. I am offering. He wiped her tears with his thumbs. We will figure this out together. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his chest. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, feeling her heart beat against his. It felt right, holding her, like coming home after a long journey. I wish I had met you first, she whispered. I wish my whole life had been different. We cannot change the past, but maybe we can shape the future. She looked up at him, her green eyes searching his face. What are you saying? I am saying that when this is over, however it ends, I want you to stay, not as a guest or someone hiding, but as someone who belongs here, with me. Zachary, I know it is fast. I know it seems crazy, but nothing about this has been normal from the start. I found you in my barn on Christmas morning. If that is not a sign, I do not know what is. I am married. To a man who does not deserve you, to a man who hurt you. His voice grew intense. Marriage should be built on love and respect and partnership. What you have with him is not a marriage. It is a prison. The law does not see it that way. Then we will find a way around the law, or we will go somewhere the law does not reach, or he stopped, a thought occurring to him, or we will make our own law. What do you mean? I mean out here, we are pretty far from judges and courts and legal proceedings. I mean if something happened to Robert Winters, if he just disappeared or had an accident, who would really investigate too hard? Francesca pulled back, her eyes wide. You are talking about killing him. I am talking about protecting you. Zachary, no. I will not let you become a murderer for me. I will not let you risk your soul and your freedom. Then what do you suggest? We wait for him to show up and drag you back. We hope he just gives up and goes away. Men like him do not give up, Francesca. You know that. She turned away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. I do not know. I do not have answers. All I know is that I ran to escape violence, and I will not solve that by creating more violence. Zachary wanted to argue, but he could see the set of her shoulders, the firmness in her voice. She was right, morally speaking, but morality and survival were not always the same thing. All right, he said finally. No violence unless there is absolutely no other choice. We will try to find another way. Thank you. They spent the evening in tense silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Zachary kept getting up to check the windows, looking out into the darkness for any sign of approach. Francesca tried to read but kept losing her place, her eyes distant with worry. You should sleep, Zachary said around midnight. You look exhausted. So do you. I will keep watch tonight, just in case. I will not be able to sleep knowing you are out here alone. Then we will both stay up. He poured them both coffee and they settled in the chairs by the fire. As the night wore on, they talked about everything and nothing. They shared stories from their childhoods, their hopes for the future, their fears about what tomorrow might bring. Slowly, the tension eased, replaced by a comfortable intimacy that came from sharing space and thoughts in the quiet hours. Tell me something about yourself that no one else knows, Francesca said as the clock struck 3 in the morning. Zachary thought for a moment. When I was young, maybe 7 or 8, I wanted to be a poet. I would write these terrible verses about nature and animals and hide them under my mattress. Francesca laughed, the sound bright in the darkness. A cowboy poet, I love that. What about you? What is your secret? I used to steal books from the library, she admitted. Not to keep, just to borrow for longer than allowed. I would read them in secret and then slip them back onto the shelves. I always meant to join properly, but we could not afford the membership fee. A book thief. I am shocked. But he was smiling. They fell silent again, but it was a comfortable silence now. Zachary found his eyes drifting to her face, memorizing the curve of her cheek, the way her eyelashes cast shadows in the firelight, the soft fullness of her lips. "You are staring at me," she said without opening her eyes. "I know. I cannot help it. You are beautiful." Her eyes opened, meeting his. "Even with bruises and scars, especially with them, they are proof of your strength, your survival." She stood and crossed to his chair, kneeling beside it. "Zachary Quinn, what am I going to do with you?" "I have some ideas," he said softly. "We should not, I know." But despite the words, despite all the reasons it was wrong, when she leaned forward and kissed him, he did not pull away. Her lips were soft and warm and tasted like coffee. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but it deepened as he reached up to cup her face, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Francesca rested her forehead against his. "That was wrong," she whispered. "I know. I am a married woman. I know. But it felt so right. I know." He kissed her again, shorter this time. "We do not have to decide anything tonight. We do not have to figure everything out right now. But I want you to know something, Francesca. Whatever happens, however this ends, I love you. I know it is fast and crazy and probably foolish, but it is true. I love you." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too. I think I have since you gave me your bed on Christmas morning, since you stitched up my shoulder and made me breakfast and looked at me like I was worth protecting. You are worth protecting. You are worth everything." They stayed like that, holding each other as the night slowly gave way to dawn. No decisions were made, no plans solidified, but something between them had shifted, become solid and real and undeniable. 3 days later, Robert Winters arrived. Zachary was working in the barn when he heard the horse approach. He looked up to see a tall man on a fine chestnut gelding riding into the yard. The man was exactly as Thomas had described. Dark-haired, well-dressed, with the kind of bearing that spoke of money and privilege. Zachary stepped out of the barn, positioning himself between the approaching rider and the house. His rifle was inside, too far to reach quickly, but he had his pistol on his hip. "Can I help you?" he called out. The man reined in his horse about 10 feet away. "I am looking for my wife. I have reason to believe she might be here." "I live alone," Zachary said evenly. Robert Winters smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I saw smoke from 2 fires in your house as I approached, one in the main room, one in what I assume is the bedroom. Seems like a lot of fires for a man living alone. I like my house warm." "I am sure you do." Winters dismounted, and Zachary could see he was armed as well. "Here is what I know, Mr. Quinn. I know you were in Nebraska City 6 days ago with a woman matching my wife's description. I know you claimed she was your cousin, but I checked, and you do not have any female cousins. I know my wife left Iowa 3 weeks ago, and I know she would be desperate and tired and looking for somewhere to hide. A remote ranch would be perfect." "You seem to know a lot," Zachary said, his hand drifting toward his pistol. "What you do not seem to know is that this is private property and you are trespassing. The law gives me the right to retrieve my wife." "What law? I do not see any sheriff with you. I do not see any legal writ. All I see is a stranger on my property making accusations." Winter's face hardened. "Francesca," he called out loudly. Francesca, I know you are in there. Come out now and we can go home and forget all about this." The door to the house opened and Francesca stepped out. Zachary wanted to tell her to go back inside to stay hidden, but he could see the determination in her face. She had decided to face this. "I am not going anywhere with you, Robert," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling Zachary could see in her hands. "The hell you are not. You are my wife. I am a person. I am not your property. The law says different." He took a step toward her, but Zachary moved to block his path. "The law is not here," Zachary said quietly. "I am, and I am telling you to get back on your horse and leave. Or what? You will shoot me." "In front of witnesses," Winters laughed. "She will hang right beside you. I will take that risk." Zachary's hand closed around the grip of his pistol. "But maybe you should ask yourself if you are willing to die for this, because that is what will happen if you take another step toward her." For a long moment, the three of them stood frozen, tension crackling in the air like lightning about to strike. Zachary could see Winters calculating, weighing his options. Finally, the man took a step back. "This is not over," he said. "I will go to the territorial marshal. I will bring the law back here and you will both regret this." "By all means, go to the marshal," Zachary said. "Tell him you want your wife back, the one with bruises on her face and rope burns on her wrists. Tell him about the wound on her shoulder that needed stitching. Tell him how she ran from you in the middle of winter, so desperate to escape that she nearly died in the snow. I am sure the marshal will be very sympathetic." Uncertainty flickered across Winter's face. "She is clumsy. She fell 14 times. Francesca spoke up, stepping forward to stand beside Zachary. "Because that is how many separate injuries I had when I left you, Robert. 14 different bruises, cuts, and wounds, all in various stages of healing. All from falling down, I suppose. You are my wife. What happens between us is private. Not when it is assault, not when it is battery." Zachary pulled Francesca slightly behind him, protective. "You are done here, Winters. Leave now while you still can." For a moment, Zachary thought Winters might actually draw his weapon. The man's hand twitched toward his gun, his face flushing with anger. But then he seemed to think better of it, recognizing that he was outnumbered in will if not in numbers. "You have not heard the last of this," he spat. He mounted his horse and yanked hard on the reins, making the animal dance nervously. "Francesca, when you come crawling back, begging me to take you in, I will not be so forgiving." "I will never come back," she said clearly. "I would rather die." Winters spurred his horse and rode off, leaving deep gouges in the muddy yard. Zachary and Francesca stood watching until he was out of sight. Then Zachary let out a long breath he had not realized he was holding. "Are you all right?" he asked, turning to her. She was shaking now, the adrenaline fading and leaving her weak. "I do not know. I feel like I might be sick." He guided her back into the house and settled her in a chair. "You were incredibly brave out there." "I was terrified. Brave and terrified are not mutually exclusive." He knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "He is gone now. But he will come back, you heard him. He will bring the law, maybe, but he would have to explain your injuries. And out here, even if the law technically sides with a husband, most marshals do not look kindly on men who beat their wives." He squeezed her hands. "We have time to figure this out. Unless he just comes back in the night and takes me by force." The thought had occurred to Zachary as well. "Then we make sure you are never alone, and we make sure we are ready if he tries." Over the next week, they fortified the ranch as best they could. Zachary moved his bed into the main room so he was always between Francesca and any potential entrance. He kept weapons within easy reach at all times. He even rode out to visit his nearest neighbor, a grizzled old rancher named Samuel Pierce, and explained the situation. Samuel agreed to keep an eye out and to come running if he heard gunfire, but Winters did not return. Days passed, then a week, then two. The tension slowly eased, though neither of them fully relaxed. During this time, Zachary and Francesca grew even closer. They worked together during the day, her helping with smaller ranch tasks while he handled the heavier work. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, reading or talking or simply existing in comfortable silence. The kisses became more frequent, though they always stopped before things went too far. Francesca was still technically married, and both of them wanted to honor that boundary, even if they did not honor the marriage itself. "I wrote to my friend back in Iowa," Francesca said one evening in late January. "I asked her to inquire discreetly about Robert. What did you find out?" "He left Iowa the day after I did. No one has seen him since. His business is failing without him there to run it. There are rumors he was involved in some shady financial dealings." She folded the letter and set it aside. "My friend says people are asking questions. If he stays away much longer, he might lose everything." "Good," Zachary said firmly. "Is it terrible that I hope he loses everything, that I hope he suffers even a fraction of what he made me suffer? It is human. You are entitled to your anger. I do not want to be angry anymore." She looked at him. "I want to be happy. I want to build a life. I want—" She trailed off. "What do you want?" he prompted gently. "This. A future that does not involve running or hiding or being afraid." She stood and crossed to where he sat. "I know we cannot really be together while I am still married. I know it is wrong. But Zachary, I have spent so much of my life doing what I was supposed to do, being what I was supposed to be. When does it become my turn to choose?" He pulled her down onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her. "You can choose right now. You can choose happiness. Choose me. Choose us. The legalities will work themselves out. What if they do not? What if Robert never agrees to a divorce? What if the law says I have to go back? Then we will go somewhere the law cannot reach. We will go to California or Oregon or Mexico if we have to. I do not care where we end up as long as we are together." She kissed him then, deep and searching, and he responded with all the love and longing he had been holding back. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she rested her head on his shoulder. "I want to marry you properly someday," she said. "In a church with witnesses, everything done right and legal. We will," he promised. "However long it takes, we will." In February, a letter arrived from the territorial marshal's office. Zachary read it with growing surprise, then handed it to Francesca. It was a notice that Robert Winters had been arrested in Omaha on charges of fraud and embezzlement. Multiple investors had come forward accusing him of stealing their money. He was being held pending trial with bail set so high there was no chance of him posting it. "He is in jail," Francesca breathed. "He cannot come after me. No, he cannot." Zachary felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "And if he is convicted, he will be in jail for years. Does this mean?" She looked up at him with hope blazing in her eyes. "Does this mean we are free?" "It means you are safe. It means we do not have to worry about him showing up with the law." He took her hands. "As for everything else, we will take it one step at a time. Maybe once he is convicted, you can petition for divorce on the grounds of abandonment and criminal activity." "Is that possible?" "I do not know, but we will find out. We will talk to a lawyer, do this properly." He pulled her close. "One way or another, Francesca, we will build the life we want. I promise you that." Spring came to Nebraska territory with its usual dramatic flair. The snow melted, revealing the brown earth beneath. Tiny green shoots began to appear in the pastures. The cattle, which had weathered the winter well, began to grow fat on new grass. Francesca bloomed along with the land. The bruises had long since faded. the wound on her shoulder healing to a pale scar. She smiled more, laughed more, moved through the house and the ranch with the confidence of someone who belonged. In April, Zachary made the trip to Nebraska City specifically to consult with a lawyer. The news was better than he had hoped. Robert Winters had been convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison. More importantly, Nebraska territory had provisions for divorce in cases where a husband had been convicted of a felony and imprisoned. Francesca could petition for divorce and would almost certainly be granted it. When he told her, she wept with relief and joy. "It is really over. I am really free." "You are free," he confirmed. "We both are." They filed the petition the following week. The waiting period was 6 months, which felt like an eternity but was actually quite reasonable. During that time, Francesca threw herself into making the ranch truly a home. She planted a garden, sewed curtains for the windows, and even convinced Zachary to let her paint the kitchen a cheerful yellow. "It is too bright," he complained, though his smile gave away his true feelings. "It is perfect," she insisted. "Every time I walk in here, I want to remember that dark times are over and bright times are ahead." They were careful during those 6 months, maintaining propriety even though everyone in town knew they were living together. Zachary introduced Francesca as his intended, and people accepted it without question. In a place where women were scarce and everyone had their own complicated past, no one was inclined to judge. In late September, the divorce was finalized. Zachary collected the papers from the courthouse and rode home faster than was probably safe, pushing his horse to a gallop. Francesca was in the garden when he arrived, her skirts hitched up and her hands deep in the soil as she pulled up the last of the potatoes. She looked up at the sound of his approach and knew immediately from his face. "It is done," she called out. "It is done." He dismounted and ran to her, scooping her up and spinning her around despite the dirt on her hands and dress. "You are free, Francesca, truly free." She laughed and cried at the same time, holding on to him tightly. "I can hardly believe it. After everything, it is finally over." "It is over," he confirmed, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "And now the beginning starts. The beginning." He dropped to one knee, right there in the garden, and pulled a ring from his pocket. It was simple, just a gold band, but he had saved for months to buy it. "Francesca Cooper, I found you sleeping in my barn on Christmas morning, the best gift I have ever received. You have made my house a home and my life complete. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she said immediately, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and kissed her, long and deep and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both were crying happy tears. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Nebraska City. It was a simple ceremony, attended by the few friends Zachary had made in the area, and some of the women Francesca had befriended while helping with sewing projects. Samuel Pierce stood as Zachary's best man, gruffly emotional throughout the proceedings. The minister's wife stood with Francesca. Zachary wore his best suit, newly pressed. Francesca wore a dress she had made herself from fabric she had bought with money earned from sewing for other women in town. It was cream-colored with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs, simple but beautiful. As they spoke their vows, Zachary thought about how far they had both come. Less than a year ago, he had been alone, resigned to a solitary life. Francesca had been trapped in a nightmare, seeing no way out. Now they stood together, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister said with a warm smile. "You may kiss your bride." Zachary did not need to be told twice. He pulled Francesca into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, to the applause and cheers of their small audience. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful. They shared a meal at the town's hotel restaurant, toasted with whiskey and wine, and danced to music provided by a local fiddler. As the sun set, they made their way back to the ranch, to the house that was now truly theirs together. That night, in the bed they now shared as husband and wife, Zachary held Francesca close and marveled at the turn his life had taken. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, tracing patterns on his chest with her finger. "About how none of this was planned. How I woke up one Christmas morning expecting just another ordinary day and instead found us." "You believe in fate," he considered. "I do not know about fate, but I believe in providence. I believe that sometimes the universe conspires to put people together who need each other. We did need each other, did we not? You needed someone to make your house a home. I needed someone to show me what real love looks like. We still need each other," he corrected. "That part has not changed," she snuggled closer. "No, that part will never change." The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Zachary's herd grew and Francesca's garden produced abundantly. She also started taking in sewing projects from women all over the county, building a reputation for beautiful, careful work. In the spring of 1874, their first child was born, a son they named Thomas after the storekeeper who had helped protect Francesca's secret. The birth was difficult, and for a few terrifying hours, Zachary thought he might lose her. But Francesca was as strong as ever, and she came through it safely. Holding his son for the first time, Zachary was overwhelmed with a love so fierce it almost frightened him. This tiny person was part of him and part of Francesca, a living symbol of their love and their future. "He is perfect," Francesca said from the bed, exhausted but glowing. "He is," Zachary agreed, "just like his mother." Thomas was followed by a daughter in 1876, whom they named Mary after Francesca's mother. Mary had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn determination. She was walking by 9 months and talking in full sentences before her second birthday. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers. There were illnesses and injuries. There were times when money was tight and worry kept them up at night. But through it all they had each other, and that made every challenge bearable. On Christmas morning 1882, exactly 10 years after Zachary had found Francesca in his barn, they woke early with their children to exchange gifts and celebrate. Thomas was now 8, Mary was 6, and they had added another son, Samuel, who was 3. As the children tore into their presents, excited about the small toys and treats they found, Zachary and Francesca sat together on the sofa, watching with contentment. "You remember 10 years ago today?" Zachary asked quietly. "Every detail," Francesca said. "I was so scared, so cold, so certain my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning." "Our life was just beginning," she corrected. She laced her fingers through his. "I think about that scared woman in the barn sometimes. I wish I could go back and tell her that everything would be all right. That she would find love and safety and happiness beyond anything she could imagine. She found all that and more." He kissed her temple. "We both did." Thomas looked up from his new wooden horse. "Papa, tell us again about how you and Mama met." It had become their favorite story, the tale of Christmas morning in the barn. Zachary had told it countless times, always editing out the darker parts about Robert Winters and focusing on the providence of finding each other. "Well," he began, pulling Mary onto his lap while Thomas scooted closer and Francesca held Samuel. "It was Christmas morning, 10 years ago today, and the snow had just stopped falling." The children listened with rapt attention, even though they had heard it all before. When he got to the part about giving Francesca his bed, Mary sighed dramatically. "Papa is a hero," she declared. "No, sweetheart," Zachary said. "Your mother is the hero. I just had the good sense to help her when she needed it." "You are both heroes," Thomas said firmly, with the certainty of childhood. Later, after the children had gone to play with their gifts and Francesca was preparing Christmas dinner, Zachary stepped outside for a moment. The air was cold and crisp, and fresh snow had fallen overnight, blanketing everything in white just like it had 10 years ago. He walked to the barn and stood in the doorway, looking at the spot where he had found Francesca. It seemed impossible that so much could have changed from that one moment. One decision to show kindness to a stranger had transformed his entire life. Francesca came up beside him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cold. "What are you doing out here? Just thinking, remembering." She slipped her arm through his. "Any regrets?" "Not a single one." "You?" "Only that I did not find you sooner." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "But I think the timing was exactly right. We both needed to go through what we went through to be ready for each other." "Maybe so." They stood there for a moment in comfortable silence, then Francesca shivered. "Come on. Dinner will not cook itself, and we have 3 hungry children inside." As they walked back to the house together, Zachary took one last look at the barn. That was where it all started, where his real life began. Where he found not just a woman sleeping in the hay, but his future, his partner, his love. Inside, the house was warm and filled with the sounds of their children laughing and playing. The table was set for their Christmas meal. Everything was exactly as it should be. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Zachary and Francesca sat together by the fire, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Quinn," he said softly. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Quinn," she replied. And in that moment, in that perfect peace, Zachary knew that every hard thing he had ever endured, every lonely night, every struggle, had been worth it to arrive at this place. With this woman. With this life they had built together from nothing more than a chance encounter on a snowy Christmas morning. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and steady. And inside, 2 people who had found each other when they needed it most sat together in the warmth and light, grateful for the providence that had brought them together and the love that would carry them through all the years to come. The end.